saved the best for last. Let's just be real. I saved the absolute best for last because it's the best. It's so good. Hey friend, hi. Welcome back to my channel. I have my coffee in front of me with my napkin. Thank you so much. And my cat mug. And I have makeup in front of me. And I have the objective of telling you all of the books that I read this month. And I was trying to think about what order I wanted to go in. My desk area is very, very messy right now, and but I'm going to ignore that. So I was thinking about how I wanted to rank these books. And so I came up with the idea of going lowbrow to highbrow, or like most commercial to most literary. I have no problems with the terms lowbrow, middling brow, or middle brow, and then highbrow. I think everybody, y'all, should read what you want to read, enjoy what you want to enjoy, and not really think about those things. But I thought it could be a fun way to rank the books. So, just know that like I'm not using the terms in a condescending way. I would never do that. I know I want to wear this color on my lips, and I have I finished 12 books in the month of October, but I'm going to tell you about 13. And we are going to start with the lowest brow book, if that's how you want to call it. I think that this will be quite fun, okay? All right, the first book I'm going to tell you about is going to be my lowest brow book, the most commercial book that I read, and I actually did a whole review on it. And I think one of the reasons why I disliked it so much is because it didn't make a lot of sense. It required a lot of suspension of disbelief and a lot of just going with it, and going with it not because it has such high concepts that you have to let it go in order to continue reading the book, or that it was too difficult. It was like, that doesn't add up. Like, that does not add up in the story, that doesn't add up in the book, and to no surprise to most of you, it is Colleen Hoover's Verity. My review really said it all, but I'll say it again. Horrible character work, terrible plotting. The suspension of disbelief was so strong that I felt like I mean, there are some fantasy worlds that required me to suspend my disbelief less than this realistic fiction novel or thriller that happened, and the events that happened in Verity. It was awful. It was terrible. Perhaps to give Colleen Hoover a tiny bit of credit though, she does write not thriller, which is what Verity is. She writes contemporary romance books. And contemporary romance is not really my genre, so I don't foresee myself reading anything else by her anytime soon. But I just know that from Verity, it really left a bad taste in my mouth for Colleen Hoover. I need to come up with some sort of plan. So I'm going to talk about two more books that are kind of at the same commercial fiction level. It's commercial fiction that's doing it really, really well. And then I'm going to put on some lipstick, and then I'll talk about my arched brow. Like, it's like an arched, it's a middle brow kind of thing. And then figure out the rest of the plan from there, okay? That's what the plan is. So the next book is a commercial fiction read, and this is the one that I'm not quite done with, but I'd rather just talk about it now so that all of the books in November are nonfiction for Nonfiction November. And it is The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest, which is the third book in Stieg Larsson's Dragon Tattoo or Millennium series. And yet again, we're with the characters of Lisbeth Salander and Mikael Blomkvist and all of their shenanigans that's happening. And right now, I feel like we are about to take down the Swedish government for, conspiracy and bad things, y'all. Bad things. I'm reading this with my friend Sonja, and we've talked quite a bit about, like, what does it mean to be like the hornet's nest? What does it mean to kick the hornet's nest? And I was like, maybe they're provoking all of the good guys to come after the bad guys, or maybe the Hornets are the bad guys and kicking the hornet's nest is just getting them all mixed up and up in arms. So it's been really fun to discuss this with her. And again, this is just, it's a great installment in the series. It's one of those things where there's a ton of moving parts, there's a lot to follow, and it's fun. It's just a lot of fun. So having a good time with this one. Then at the very beginning of the month, I read the first book in the Thursday Murder Club series by Richard Osman, and that I'm gonna like put up a picture over here, and that was fantastic. Oh my gosh, that is so much fun. Now, do I remember that? Characters' names, not my thing. So what it is it's a mystery book. I think it's probably classified as a cozy mystery, and you're following this group of older people like in a retirement home kind of deal, and they're not like 60, they seem quite a bit older, and you're following 4 of them. And so there's Elizabeth, sort of the ringleader, Ron, the outlandish, over the top kind of older man, Abraham, the intellectual one, and then Joyce, the sweet one. And they get a murder to investigate. They kind of fall into a murder. It's called the Thursday Murder Club because at first they were researching older murders that happened and trying to crack cold cases. And then, of course, as these things happen, a real mystery murderer comes on their hands, and they have to like actually do some work and try and figure it out. Again, there's a lot of moving parts, and it, like the Dragon Tattoo series, Stieg Larsson series, the Millennium series, it's just done so well. It's just in the hands of somebody who knows what they're doing in terms of character work and story and intricate plot lines, and it all comes together, and it's kind of surprising how it comes together, and there's just something really charming about it. I would have continued with the series, but the second book in the series is not on my it's not in the format that I want to consume it as, and so at my library. So I got the first book from my library, and the second book I'm just like waiting for somebody to return it. I'm waiting for it to pop up somewhere, and then the third book came out, which is brand new. And of course I want to read that too, but I'm like, this second book is just missing. And so I have to like track it down somehow. What was my plan? Lips. Okay, we're gonna do lips. While I'm at it, I'm just gonna do some blush. On to what I would call the arched brow. So it's somewhere in between highly literary and lowbrow, or highly literary and commercial. So the first book is going to be Bastard Out of Carolina by Dorothy Allison. This is a book in which we are following the character of Bone, and Bone is living in Greenville, South Carolina, which is actually just a few hours away. I picked this up because this is a South Carolina classic, and I suggested it for the Up to No Good Book Club. Now, I didn't care for this book, but let me tell you what this is about first. I should probably start with that. This is about the character of Bone, who's a young girl, and she is with a single mother who has another daughter. So Bone has a sister, and her mother is part of a pretty wild family in that they are like no holds barred kind of family. They like to break the rules. They like to end up in the newspapers. They get in scraps. They speak their mind. And she's a part of this kind of family. And meanwhile, her mother is in a couple of different relationships throughout the book, and ultimately lands on a guy named Glenn. The story kind of takes off from there. There's a lot of tension. There's a lot of talk about poverty. And there is, if you want to skip to have like absolutely no spoilers, skip 10 seconds ahead, but there is sexual assault to a minor in this book. And for that reason, I had a very difficult time enjoying this book or even wanting to pick it up, because that type of thing really bothers me. It really kind of shakes me to my core. It could be that I have young children. Because I have young children, it just frightens me in a way that it wouldn't have 7 years ago before my oldest son was born. But since I have children, and since I obviously care about their well-being, reading atrocious things that happen to young people is just hard for me. And so there was a point, it's actually in chapter 4, it's early on, something happens, something quite big happens after that chapter, which again, it's not like there are only 7 chapters in the book and then chapter 4 is like in the middle. No, it's early on. I just had a really hard time wanting to even get invested in the characters if I know that they were going to be harmed. So Dorothy Allison is a good writer. She knows what she's doing. She does really good character work. The dynamics of the family, the actual family, was fantastic. Like, you really got a sense of who they were and what they valued, even though it wasn't exactly what society values. And you really got a sense of the women in Bones' life, which was really cool, very dynamic. Each one of them had their own sense of goals, ambitions, reasons why they did what they did. And so that was fascinating. But when it came right down to it, the thing that happens in chapter 4 made me so uneasy that I felt like I couldn't trust Dorothy Allison for the rest of the book. And so it was really difficult for me to continue to want to be invested in someone that I felt like I couldn't trust. And so this was a really kind of meh read for me. I brought nothing for eyebrows, so I'm going to go get my eyebrow stuff and I will be right back. The next arched brow book, which I can't actually do, I can't do an arched brow, is Comfort Me with Apples by Catherynne Valente, which is a very weird novella. It's a very strange novella that is ultimately, actually, I think the best thing is to go in blind. Just know that Sophia has the most perfect house, the most perfect husband, in the most perfect neighborhood that actually has a lot of weird rules, and you get a very like Stepford Wives, is that what it's called? Stepford Wives vibe. Like there is like this foreshadowing that things don't seem quite as perfect as they actually may look on the outside. So I read this and it was really good. It was really delightful. As soon as I understood the twist, all of the pieces definitely fell in place and I thought it was quite brilliant. And I was kind of surprised. I was quite surprised at how purple Valente's prose was. I mean, it's vibrant. It is so purple prosy. And that was actually like the thing that I both liked and disliked about it. It was like, I don't know if I want to actually read more from Valente because her prose is so descriptive. It's almost like over the top descriptive. But then I almost wanted to slow clap her for those descriptions. So it was a very strange experience. The book was a very strange book. And if you want just a weird, strange old time, I would say Comfort Me with Apples is your thing. The next book I actually learned is a term called, it falls under the category of comfort, cozy literary fiction. I think that's what it's called. And it is the 4th book in the MGASH series about Lucy Barton. Is that right? Oh my gosh. Lucy Barton. That's right. Okay, so Lucy Barton. So she is a writer. She's an elderly lady or an older lady. And her whole series is following her life, but mostly focusing on the latter part of her life. And then as she's reflecting on her life, she'll tell you little bits and pieces about her childhood, which was really rough and rooted in just abject poverty, which was, it's hard to read about, and with a mother that had clearly a lot of issues and a father that clearly had a lot of issues. But mostly you're following her life as it is when she is a successful writer in New York, and then she will use her background to fill in the pieces of who she is. And so interestingly, Lucy by the Sea, the 4th installment of the series by Elizabeth Strout, by the way, I don't think I mentioned that, it's written in this time of COVID, and I thought that was really interesting. I don't know, I'm kind of one of those people that's like, I'm totally open to COVID fiction. I think I'm less interested in the books that just talk about being home alone. I'm like, y'all, I experience that. I mean, being home and having the Groundhog's Day feeling, like I experienced that with my family. My husband was working from home, my kids were home, I was home, everybody was home. I understand that feeling and that sort of, I don't know, the strangeness of languishing and as the days sort of pass by and you're trying to keep yourself busy or keep yourself occupied for that time. So with the whole Lucy Barton series, it was interesting because it wasn't about that. There was an actual plot. There were characters that I had seen before in the earlier novels that you revisit. There is a warmth and a comfort to revisiting and being back in this world with Lucy Barton. Interestingly though, it was a take of what it was like to experience COVID from New York City and then getting transplanted somewhere else, or like taking off and getting out of New York City, and those feelings and just being worried about your loved ones and and the very much like anxiety that had to do with not really knowing what was going on, which is what we all had. We didn't know what COVID was, and we didn't know how dangerous it was, and so it was an interesting take on that. And it was also fascinating to hear about it from Lucy, who is older and could be considered high risk, and so her approach to the pandemic was different than my approach to the pandemic. And of course, again, you're just with the characters that at least I know and love, and so it was really nice being back there. And there were some observations that Lucy Barton made in the book that both made me laugh and absolutely sob. So I don't know, there's just something about that series that is really near and dear to my heart, and I really enjoyed the 4th installment of it. My last book is actually going to be a series that I feel is very like arched brow kind of thing, somewhere in between commercial and literary. And I read it and I thought it was quite fun, but I know that some readers think this book is very literary. This is a very polarizing series, and that is The Magicians, the 3 books in the Magicians series. So The Magicians, followed by The Magician King, and then finally The Magician's Land by Lev Grossman. And in this, we are following a bunch of millennials dealing with millennial malaise. That sort of, what do we do with our lives? I have no idea. Like this, there's definitely like this playfulness between somebody who loves fantasy so much that you want it to be real. And I was definitely one of those kids. I've definitely been one of those millennials that's like, what am I going to do with my life? And having like existential crises at the age of 20, you know, that was me. And so it was really interesting to get a different take on that and a playfulness with that. And it's set in a fantasy world. That, you know, it's not the real world. We're definitely got a little bit of a Harry Potter-esque feel to it. But it also is very adult. The characters are 17 and above, and so they are thinking about drinking and their next partner in life for that moment and all of that. The first book has a lot of bawdiness to it, B-A-W-D-Y, in that there is a lot of like humor dealing with sexuality, and that is not necessarily my bag, but there was a lot going for it in that, like, I don't know, it was just a sense of fun. I was one of those kids that read a good bit of fantasy when I was younger, and I really enjoyed the feeling that it gave me, and in some ways this brought back some of those feelings, but with a twist that now we're following millennials and definitely adults. And then the first book ended, and I was reading it with my friend Fraser Simons at the channel Springboard that, and so we just went on to the next one. He had read the books before, and I was really invested in watching the characters grow, and I think the second book delivered that to a T. A character that was very developed in the first book came out in the second book, and it was just it was fun to follow her and to see like her badassness come out. And yeah, it was really fun to watch the characters change. And then also, I don't know if it was like the critiques of the readers or what, but a lot of that bawdy humor that was in the first book is totally written out of the second book. It creeps up a little bit, and by the third book it's completely gone, and it could be attributed to the fact that the characters grow, and so, you know, that kind of humor tends to fade as people grow if you mature, in my opinion. Or not, you know, no judgment here. It's just like, I think that sometimes what one thinks is funny at the age of 20, they don't think is funny at the age of 30, and you get that feeling. So I really had a good time with this, and again, it's like the arched brow moment. I think I'm just gonna put on mascara and call it a day. We've reached the highest point of the video, the highbrow work, the most intellectual, the absolute opposite of what Verity was. And that I'm going to start with a Pulitzer Prize winning novel, and that is The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. Interestingly, when I was about to embark on the Edith Wharton journey this month, I had a couple of people in my comments say that they preferred, I don't know how much more, they preferred this book over The House of Mirth, which I read back in April, I believe. believe, and it was, or May, and it was fantastic. The House of Mirth is incredible. Now, this story follows the character of Newland Archer, who is about to be married to a young lady named May Welland, and it's very much following these two families, the families of May Welland and the family of Newland Archer. There's similarities and differences. Of course, it is set in New York with the upper crust of society. Newland Archer has a lot of really fascinating internal struggles, especially of that when he's thinking about women's place in society. That was really fascinating, and ultimately the question of women's power in society, the double standards that we have for men and women, especially at that time, the way that women gain access to power, and also how power is lost. I mean, all of that was very much bubbling underneath and on top of the surface of this novel. And it was incredible. It was simply incredible. The opening scene, we're at the opera and someone walks in and she is not of fashion, you know, and I loved the description of the dresses and fashion and the hoity-toityness and why one family is more into food and the other family is more into art, and the different ways we can be a snob in a lot of ways, but also just the bigger conversation about women that Edith Wharton was having throughout the whole novel. I loved it. I loved it so much. I thought it was brilliant, fantastic, amazing. I read this with my friend Sandy. I think I loved it more than her. I'm pretty sure I did. And I just thought it was great. It was great. Wow. So if you have never, read Edith Wharton, start with either The House of Mirth or The Age of Innocence. They both have a lot to offer. And I will say, I just thought this was brilliant. I mean, hands down, so incredible. All right, next up in the highbrow category, we have Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Now, Victor Frankenstein is the scientist in which he is very interested in playing God. And in a lot of ways, he's able to achieve that and creates a monster, a creature. And it's so much about the conversation in terms of, who gets to play God and the consequences of that, but it's about empathy and extending empathy to people and situations we may not fully understand. And it also had one of the most unlikable characters I have ever met, Victor Frankenstein himself. I wanted to slap him upside the face so hard. This actually made it into like the flops part of the Tops and Flops series that I make with Fraser Simons at the channel Springboard. That I actually read this with him as well. And interestingly, it made it into that video, not because this is a brilliant work. Let me clarify that for one. This is brilliant. Mary Shelley's writing is incredible, truly scrumptious and amazing. The descriptions, the structure of the story, all of it was great. So it's not that I didn't like the book. I just was shook. I was shook that I had such a volatile reaction to Victor Frankenstein himself. I thought he was treacherous. I was like, how is Victor Frankenstein not included on the worst characters of like internally some of the worst characters of all time ever? He should be included on every single list because he is just the epitome of somebody who lacks courage, who lacks owning up to their mistakes, who makes no effort to correct them, and who only looks out for himself. Just a wretched character. And so it made it into that video because I hated Frankenstein so much. The character of Frankenstein. The book was brilliant. It really kind of shows how talented Mary Shelley is as a writer to get me to feel this way about someone. But wow. I had no idea that I had it even in me to like someone so much. So yeah, if that doesn't tempt you to pick up the book, I think there are some people for which, and I'm one of them, for which they absolutely disdain Frankenstein. And then there are some people who find the philosophy and the questions that Mary Shelley's writing like far more interesting than the nattering complaints of Victor. So I don't know, I definitely fell in the camp of like, oh my gosh, can you please zip it, sir? So yeah, anyways, that's it for me, because I went on and on about how much I disliked Frankenstein. But the book, don't get me, the book is brilliant, and so if you have a chance to pick it up and read it, I would definitely highly recommend it. Now, I've saved the best for last. Let's just be real. I saved the absolute best for last because it's the best. It's so good. And it was amazing. And it's like, to me, the highest brow, probably because it was a challenge it was a challenging read for me. There are so many characters, there are so many moving pieces. We're in a time period that I don't really know. It still was able to capture my imagination. It was still able to capture my attention in a way that blew me out of the water. It was so good. And that is Antonio Scurati's M, Son of the Century, which follows Mussolini, Benito Mussolini, from 1919 to 1924. This is the first book of a planned quartet, and it was brilliant. I'm like, it was so good. This is a political thriller. It's a political drama. So there is a lot about political parties, the Socialist Party, the Republicans, the Democrats, and then the fascists, and even like the alignment of ideas and the way extremism starts. Wow. Wow. So the thing that made it difficult, and at the back of the book there is a cast of characters, primary characters, which was very much needed for me, because I am somebody who doesn't know that much about Italy during 1919 and beyond. So I really needed those cast of characters to follow who was associated with what party, and their motivations. And that cast of characters was a lifesaver, for me at least. But what made this book so good is because there was so much to say. There was so much to say. And I will say that when we get dropped into the story, and what I was able to parse out through reading it, is that the attitude of the Italians, the emotional landscape and financial landscape of Italy during 1919, and the way that Mussolini was able to gain traction and ultimately gain power. Wow. Wow. There are some really key events that happen in the book that stand out so vividly in my mind as I read them, that I could see it play, like I could watch it play out as like an action scene in a movie. And not every book can do that, you know? Like, not every book is able to do that. And this was able to do it like 5 or 6 or 7 times. It was just incredible. In some ways it's fast moving, in some ways it's not. Anyways, I'm gonna stop. Maybe I should do a whole single book review on this, but at the end of the day, it was a brilliant work. And what's also even more brilliant is that you have these fiction chapters, and then after every chapter almost, or after every couple of chapters, it's interspersed with actual documents of the time and clips of speeches, parts of telegrams, like parts of a letter, and he includes those, and it almost makes the book feel even more eerie, even more just impactful, because he's not just pulling this, like, Scurati's not just pulling this out of thin air. It's rooted very much in a lot of research and in documents that paraphrase or say word for word what he included in the novel. And so you're just like, wow, wow. I mean, just an awe-inspiring book. I loved it. I loved it so much. Now, I will say that it very much has that Wolf Hall kind of quality, the Hilary Mantel Wolf Hall type of quality. It's a dense work. It's got a lot going on in it. And I will say, if you're somebody who's not into political thrillers or political dramas, if you're not interested in fascists from the 1924, if you're not interested in Benito Mussolini, and if you realize that Wolf Hall was not for you because it was too dense and there were too many characters and it didn't explain enough to you, I would imagine that you would feel similarly about Antonio Scurati's book. But this, I mean, there's a lot more action in this. It's very different in terms of like what it's saying and what it's trying to do. But I will say that I think that readers of Wolf Hall will really love M Son of the Century. And if you're somebody who's just like, I just want a streamlined storyline that doesn't have, I'm not into that kind of thing, then I would say maybe this book isn't for you. But gosh, I mean, if you see it at the library, just try it. I mean, it's so good. It's so worth it. Anyways, okay, I'm gonna stop gushing. I just loved it so much. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Thank you for hanging out. I really appreciate it. And yeah, tell me what did you read this month that was amazing? Was it highbrow or lowbrow or an archbrow? I wish I could. I'm like trying to do it and I can't. I really, I would really love to know. And yeah, that's it for me. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. And I will see you in my next one. Bye.